Welcome to Why We Podcast with your host, Vik Rajan, where attorneys, accountants, coaches, and clients share how their show helps their clients, their audience, their guests, and their own practices. You can watch episodes on YouTube and listen through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. For the live stream and prior episodes, go to videosocials.net/whywepodcast. Have you ever thought about hosting your own podcast? Already host one? Do you like to be featured on other people's podcasts? Come to our next show host networking event and introduce yourself to dozens of podcast hosts who interview subject matter experts like you. You can RSVP for free at videosocials.net/showhosts. Now here's the host of Why We Podcast, Vik Rajan.
Hi, everybody. It's another Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, so you know it's another episode of Why We Podcast. Again, my name is Vik Rajan. I am the co-founder of Video Socials. We are a business community of attorneys, accountants, coaches, and consultants. We come together in our video blogging clubs to get recorded together, fun and done, for our video blogs, our podcast promo videos. A lot of our clients also have their own live streams or video shows or audio podcasts, and we now run over a dozen of them for our clients through our Video Socials VIP program, which affectionately stands for Video Interview Podcasts, but our clients are, of course, VIP to us as well. Today, I have three wonderful VIP as well, Mr. Paul Levitin, Tony Carnesi, and Brian Groman. In a moment, we're going to hear why they podcast, the benefits they see of podcasting, not only for themselves, but what are the kind of benefits their podcast has achieved, the results that they've achieved for their audience, which may also contain their clientele and prospective clients as well. And are there benefits of their podcast to their guests, and how are they able to show that? And for me, it's a learning experience. Really being a podcast host myself, I'm learning from three others, and I'm looking forward to you guys learning from them as well. As you'll probably see in prior episodes, our guests end up having some type of synergy. Tony and Brian haven't worked together. They're co-hosts, so they obviously know each other. But I don't think they know Paul very well. I don't know Paul very well. I don't know Tony and Brian all that well, though, as we mentioned offline, that we met each other before. But I'm looking forward to seeing what's the synergy between those three, because I think that's another reason of why we podcast, is we're part of this community, this larger community of podcast hosts, which I alluded to. We have a show host networking event just about every month at the end, last Thursday in the month. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But first, Paul, before we even get into why you podcast and what your show is about, can you tell us a little bit more professionally, what do you do?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's always fun to do stuff like this and to meet, like-minded people. A big part of the reason I love podcasting is the networking effect and getting to meet people in the same sphere, in different spheres, and everything in between. Personally, so I work as a coach. I am a happiness and self-confidence coach, and I do one-to-one coaching as well as educational programs all online. And my podcast is a part of Umbrella. Well, I do a lot of free offerings like my podcast, like my social media and stuff like that, to help people be more confident, be more positive, live happier, more fulfilling lives. My brand, my podcast is simply called The Happy, Healthy Human. And that's what
we'll get to that.
All about. And that's what everything I do is all about.
Well, it's good to be all three. We'll hopefully, I make a lot of dry jokes. They don't all land, but all three: happy, healthy, and human. Speaking about being human, we got Mr. Do and Mr. B, a part of the Doobie team. I'm going to start with Tony first, and then we'll go to Brian. Tony, I know you guys are business partners, so there's definitely going to be references back and forth. But can you share a little bit about what you do professionally, even before the podcast started?
Well, as the first half of the Doobie equation, I focus on what you need to do. I'm the recovering CPA, the structure, the policies, the procedures. Your financials are a report card on how well you're doing. And my goal as a consultant is to improve those numbers. And everything underneath those numbers, the numbers will open you up to what's right and wrong with your business. And as I was working as a consultant, because I gave up my accounting practice to become a consultant, most of the time, those numbers that were failing or that were not producing, not looking as good as they should, was because of people. And I realized down the line, I need to work with a therapist or a coach because some of these people are impossible to change. And that's how I met Brian Groman.
So when did you guys meet first, and then when did you become? Are you officially business partners?
I guess official. It's unofficial, official, but we met.
Common law marriage.
Yeah, I guess that would work. We met in 2017. We're both graduates of Syracuse University. We met at an alumni event, and it was about mentorship. And we brought Brian in because we found him on LinkedIn to work with our recent alum in mentorship. And after I listened to Brian speak, I said, this is the first coach I've ever wanted to get to know. And that's how our relationship developed.
That's neat. That's cool. And Brian, is the feeling mutual?
Absolutely.
Some days, maybe not so much.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Could have gone any way, possibly. So could have been a whole different show. Go on.
I am an executive coach. So we all know business owners, and some of us fall into this trap as well, that know what we should be doing. They know what they should be doing, and they're not doing it. And so I'm the executive coach that works with business owners, business leaders, in terms of becoming that leader, that senior executive that can take their business to the next level. My background is in organizational change management. So very often I'm working with leaders who are looking to make changes in their businesses, learning how to guide their teams through those changes.
That's great. So because of that, it becomes very people oriented. So you have not only that team approach, but then it can also be kind of person oriented, which is a nice segue back to Paul's world of being individual focused, right? Of being happy and healthy. What is that transition like for you, Paul? When did it kind of dawn on you, hey, I ought to have a podcast? Like when and why did that ever happen?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, Vic, you mentioned right at the beginning, like what synergy would show up just listening to Tony and Brian talk. I'm like, oh, I see it already, because that's basically how all of this started. Was I was Tony, and except not in the financial space. I was in the fitness world. I was a personal trainer and a nutrition coach. And I had the same realization of like, I could give all these people answers and yet people don't change. So, but rather than going out and finding a Brian, I decided that I had to become that. So I learned behavioral science and behavioral economics and motivation and things like that. And I realized that like the fitness aspect wasn't what was really important to me anymore. It's more about change. How do we help people change? And then you can take and you can be financially successful or fitness successful or relationship successful. So it's all about just studying change and success. And to your question, Vic, about how that became a podcast, it's because I have the same 10 conversations with every person that I meet. And that was really that. It was just like, I would just wanted to start a podcast because, everyone thinks that they're a special snowflake and their problems are so unique to the individual. But in reality, there's like 6 things that everyone struggles with, right? So my first podcast, the very first episode is Start With Why, right? So find your why. And that's any person I talk to, I'm like, go to episode 1. I have like 80 something episodes now. I'm like, go back and listen to episode 1 before you go and listen to anything else. The second episode is building habits. These are just things that are universal to people. So now when I start to work with someone or just talk to someone, they don't have to be my client, just someone who I want to help. I'm like, there's hundreds of hours of me having the conversations that people would normally pay me thousands and thousands of dollars to have. And you can just listen to me talk. And like, that's a good way for me to help more people. And then I also get the benefit of being able to talk to really cool people and broaden my own knowledge base. But it all came, the impetus was of just being like, how do I tell people that there's certain things that I know that I'm going to have to talk to with everyone. So how can I just make this a thing that I can just give to them rather than having to have this conversation individually?
So I'm going to ask some of these same questions to Tony and Brian as well, but you're 80 episodes in. When did you literally start it? Like what year?
In September 2020. So I've been doing an episode a week. Pretty.
Yeah. So it's a weekly, good. So it's a weekly podcast. And What was that trigger point though? Like, yes, now you see the result of you basically have this knowledge library for your prospective clients, even current clients, to kind of go back and essentially pick your brain and have this knowledge base that they're able to learn from or nurture themselves, marinate until they're ready, let's say, to work with you one-on-one or even beyond. And so, but what was the lightning bulb moment, a light bulb moment rather, of saying, yeah, this would be good as a podcast, as opposed to a written blog or even a video blog or
Yeah, I get it. A few things. One is, I mean, definitely COVID, right? It was September 2020. I was sitting at home. I had a lot of time on my hands, and it was, again, I was having these conversations a lot with people and the Instagram DMs or whatever. And then the second thing is that I'm a huge fan of podcasts. It's the medium that I absorb the most. So a lot of people tell me, like, they're like, oh, you should do a YouTube, but like, I don't do YouTube. Like, I don't watch YouTube. I would never sit and watch YouTube videos. So it's a medium I don't understand. I listen to hours and hours and hours of podcasts. I love it. They've changed my life. Before I was ever a podcaster, I was learning from podcasts. When I discovered podcasts, I was like, there's just this world of free information out there where you can literally learn anything from the smartest people in the world. It blew my mind. So like, that was something that I always wanted to be. And you can hear by the speed that I talk, I like talking a lot. So talking is a good medium for me.
So you're playing back at the 1.5 rate. Is that?
Yeah. I listen on 3x speed. So that's where my brain is at all the time. Yeah.
I talk fast too. Yeah. I grew up on audiobooks. And then of course that's like predecessor to this podcast, so it makes sense. But yeah, there's plenty of YouTube podcasts and YouTube shows in a very similar way. So it'll blow your mind that you could watch people talk. So are you audio only then? Is that what the?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just audio.
Yeah, cool. So what about you, Tony and Brian? So you guys came together in 2017, and then when did you start the podcast? And I don't, Brian, if you want to kind of take the lead on this, and then Tony, you could chime in on it.
Like Paul, actually, COVID was the catalyst for us. We came into it a little bit differently. Late in 2019, we trademarked 4-day work week. We had come to realize that there's a lot of room for increasing productivity in businesses so that they can produce the same or even more while people are working less. Our plan was to roll out a 4-day work week program in the spring of 2020. And then COVID came along. And so that's when we launched It's Doobie Time, which is about the doing and being of business leadership. And our topic really has evolved with the evolving marketplace, if you will. So very early on, there was a lot of focus around COVID. We brought in experts on the different government programs. We brought in commercial and residential realtors who were dealing with real estate issues in the New York market and so forth. We brought in experts on the difference in the persona of those who succeed in the office place versus those who are going to be succeeding working from home. And it has now evolved very much into a focus on not just the 4-day work week, but the broader issues of the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffling, et cetera.
And so that makes sense. And then how do you structure the show, Tony? So you're both co-hosts, so you're both present at every show. And then how does that, how long is each episode? And take us through, is there a very similar standard format that you go episode by episode, or how do you work that out?
Okay, I just want to add on to Brian before I go into that answers. Enlightened management. Managers have to change in this new environment. Are you an enlightened manager? Are you a traditional manager stuck in the old way of waiting, expecting to see your workers at their desk? And that's what the results you're looking for. But as far as our podcast goes, we try to break our conversations with our guests 30 to 35 minutes, and we'll break that into 2 episodes. So the listeners really have a nice short little something to listen to, and then they're waiting to hear the second half. And Brian and I normally wrestle really hard on who gets to talk. We really try to have a conversation, and we both alternate asking questions. And how that works is because we're very different. We both look at things differently, but the same. We still have that same core of what we're trying to produce, but we look at it differently for different results. So we will each ask the guests questions based on what I talk about doing, Brian talks about being. I mean, it really works because we are different, and that makes the podcast, I think, that much more helpful and educational because we really dig into what our guests, what their knowledge is that they want to reflect back to the audience.
So I like hearing how people format their episodes. It kind of goes and dovetails in next in terms of, all right, what are the kind of benefits you've heard? But before we get there, talk to that format. So it's a 35-minute show. You're breaking it up into, let's say, 2 15, 20-minute type segments. But it's not necessarily the first segment is on the doing aspect and the second part is not, right? So it's a fluid conversation. Why did you choose to break it up into those kind of 15-minute, 18-minute segments as opposed to just 35 minutes? Not terribly long.
Brian, may I, or you're smiling? Basically, my perception of a business owner is let's get to the point and move on, and that's our audience. And
Yeah.
I've listened to podcasts, and Paul, I know you love them. And sometimes, and maybe I'm listening to the wrong ones at times, I listen to people drone on talking, and it's like, you got to be kidding me, right? And I feel like if we could have, like, Vic, I really like this format. We're going back and forth, and I think that helps people. And that's what Brian and I try to do. And then we said, you know what, let's break them up and make them shorter. That way somebody just listens for 10 minutes. They're in their car, they're between meetings, they're sitting at their desk. We have their attention. It's sort of like when you introduce yourself at a networking event. Yeah. If you go longer than 30 seconds, you've lost them. So that was why I thought that was a good idea. Brian, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Okay, see, there you go, to the point. So Brian, I'll ask you. So how often are you releasing episodes then? And how often do you record them and how often do you release them? It's 2 different questions for you guys.
We have just, Vic, in the last month or so, shifted our schedule. Primarily because we're now mentoring and working with the Global 4-Day Week movement. We're launching a mastermind. We've got a number of other things that are really
projects and endeavors.
And so we have just moved to a every other week release of the podcasts as of probably a month ago.
So in May of 2022, you went every other week. Prior to that, you were releasing it weekly?
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense. So now it enables you to record every other week, or how often are you recording with your guests?
It really depends on when we identify guests and when they're available.
Okay, but you don't have a set schedule. You don't like say, all right, this is Tuesdays at 11 o'clock. This is what I'm doing.
No.
Okay. No. We find that pretty helpful for our clients where it's like, let's get them on a schedule, especially that we're running the podcast, that we say, all right, like me, right? Friday's 1 o'clock. All right, this is what I'm doing. So this way I'm able to carve it out. But it's interesting to kind of see how people manage their time and get things done. So Paul, back to you and your show of The Happy, Healthy Human. And we'll get to the Doobie Show in a moment. Paul, 80 episodes in. Have you heard from your audience? Have any of them shared what they've gotten from your shows, and have any of them turned into clients or even prospective clients? What's that process been like for you?
Yeah, 100%. The feedback is pretty amazing, and that's the kind of the thing that's super cool about it and what's kept me doing this. I've had, just people reach out to me with wild things about, this so-and-so episode changed my life. Or I had someone, when I was at 75 episodes, a girl DM'd me on Instagram and she was like, hey, I just found your show because you were on so-and-so's podcast. And then I went and listened to yours. I went back to episode 1 and listened to every episode in the catalog. Like, that's awesome. And my episodes are at least 30 minutes long, if not an hour. That's like 70 hours of content, so people tell me things like that. And like, that's amazing to me. And then people like that are also my most ideal clients, because those are people who are clearly bought into what I'm doing. They see the vision, they see what I'm doing. And when I have a course, so I have my mailing list, I give a lot of freebies away and things like that. So when I am ready to release a new 8-week course, like something I'm doing right now, those are the people who are primed and ready. And even beyond that, I use my podcast as sort of a funnel, in that if I'm talking to someone and, they're telling me what their struggle is, and they say they're an executive and they deal with imposter syndrome, I go, hey, go listen to this episode. And I send them an episode I did on imposter syndrome. They go check back with them. Hey, what was your feedback on that? Oh, that really helped. Oh, hey, here's another one. And then 2 or 3 episodes in, they've listened to me talk for 2 or 3 hours without me actually having to do the talking in that moment. But that's a very warm lead in terms of converting to a sale.
So now, are you a solo show, or do you also sometimes have guests?
So I alternate. Every week,
Yeah.
one episode is just me, and then one episode is a guest, and every other week I just alternate like that.
And what's your guest criteria? Like, who do you like to bring on? Who makes sense for your show?
It's just honestly people that I think are interesting, or conversations that I think are interesting in having. So a lot of times it's other coaches, health coaches, mindset coaches, but I've had hypnotherapists on, I've had financial advisors, because again, my show, the last word is human. So when I talk, I'm not talking to the executive. What I say is the end user, the person, the mom who's driving her kids to soccer, or just the guy who's, walking to the gym or something like that, just regular people. And it's just conversations that I think are helpful around how to live a, again, happier, healthier life. It's not, I always say it's not like the super fit human podcast. It's not the super rich and successful podcast. It's just happy, healthy human. And like, that's a very general, broad topic that allows me to pick a wide array of guests.
And so you've seen the impact where people are investing dozens of hours, 20 some odd hours. And it could even turn into a funnel from an email nurture campaign, and then your courses, et cetera, which is awesome. I mean, that's that podcast funnel model works. Have you heard from your guests? Have any of them gotten benefit where they came on your show, and because of that, have they seen some uptick in business or some other result? Have you heard anything like that yet, or not yet?
So not specifically that, like not that specific, but I definitely have had people either reach out to me directly and be like, oh, I discovered so-and-so on your podcast, and now
Sure.
I'm taking their course or something. Now I'm a big fan of their show, and I'm listening to that all the time.
Okay.
So
okay. I mean, that's a good result.
Like
Look,
that
I mean,
has
if they're
happened,
getting
or,
clients because of your show, I mean, that's honestly a home run, right? I mean, that's tremendous. So for someone to say, hey, I can go on Paul's show and I might actually get a client out of that, that's tremendous value for your guests, let alone the fact that they're able to educate others. So good for you.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
That's cool. What about you, Tony and Brian? So what is that process like where you've built this audience up over the past 2 some odd years? Have you heard from the people watching and listening to your show? And are you guys also video or only audio? Like
we are audio only.
Okay. And so have you heard from your listeners?
We do. I get comment. I get people say, "Oh, nice episode." I hear that, but I think and Brian, before I get into that, is any feedback do you want to share before I think what some of the true benefits are? It's great when we meet somebody new that we tell them we have a podcast, and then we add them to the audience, and then that gives us definitely brings more value to the table for us.
Sure.
I mean, we do a number of different things marketing wise. LinkedIn. We were recently had a story published in Bloomberg Financial about the 4-day week, and that one,
excellent.
That was something that really got a direct result very fast. The podcast has been more of an organic. I've been listening to your podcast. I really like it. Sort of feedback that we get. Our guests, the types of guests that we bring along have been a wide variety of business owners to coaches like Paul, to consultants and coaches like us. And it's the value, we just try to educate, and show what the doobies are all about, and the types of things that we really believe in to our audience. Brian?
Yeah, one of the things that we both do a lot actually is share our podcast with our clients.
Oh, good.
If there's a client who's struggling with a particular issue, and again, we're very close to Paul, where I think episode 79 came out yesterday. If there's something a client is struggling with, here's a podcast for you. Let's come back and talk about it after you've listened and see how you can make this work for you.
So it's very interesting to hear, because there's one angle, but there's one approach that Paul was talking about. A lot of podcast hosts use their podcast as a knowledge base or resource, really a marination tool for prospective clients, where maybe they're not quite ready for that one-on-one engagement relationship, but here it's a way for that prospective client to kind of gain insight, gain value, and maybe even kind of sell themselves on it. Your approach, at least one of the approaches, is prescribing it as homework, if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'll call it, prescribing it as homework to your current clients, or saying, hey, I want you to listen to episode 49 and kind of book club approach. We'll come back at the next session and talk about what did you get from it? What did you learn or maybe implement from it? Is that am I paraphrasing accurately?
It's both for us.
Yeah. So it can be, of course, a marination nurturing tool, right? But also very interesting. I find it very interesting to highlight that it can be used within client service. That's not something I do with our clients. It's something I should do with our clients. So I always like to see, like, what am I learning from you guys that I should be doing, or that our other clients should be doing as well? Like, that's interesting. Can we make it kind of part of the curriculum, so to speak? Yeah, go on.
And as you build that database, if you will, now if I see somebody writing about something on LinkedIn, I might send them a link to the podcast on that topic.
Yeah, right. That's really great. I can imagine. Is there anything that I haven't done? We're about to take a quick commercial break. As I mentioned to you guys, I am my own advertiser, so we'll take a quick commercial break in a minute. But Brian, before I go there, is there something that I didn't add that for you, what do you get out of hosting a podcast with Tony? Is there something together? Is there a synergy that you've experienced beyond being business partners, or is there something else that you've gained? And feel free to say no.
So first of all, absolutely, an incredibly powerful synergy between Tony and me, because as he said, we look at the world differently, and yet we come from the same place. And it's a place, talking about synergy, that Paul mentioned at the beginning. One of the things that brought Tony and I together is the belief that if we can reconnect people with their purpose, with their vision, they'll make the changes they need in themselves and their business in order to be successful. For me, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And so the podcasts, having incredible guests on, is another way for me to learn and grow, which I find personally fulfilling, but it also makes me better professionally and able to serve our clients.
That's simple and profound, Brian. What about you, Tony? What have you gotten from hosting the show?
Well, the guests come on and they will say something. They'll try to be relaying the same message to the audience, but they'll be saying it differently. And what's really cool is they're reinforcing some of the things that we bring to the table, but they bring a different look at it and a different way of presenting it. Because, if you're going to change someone and they don't hear you the first time, then you need to reframe it in another way. And what's beautiful is when we have podcast guests, they reframe it differently. And then our listeners, our audience, our clients, our prospects are hearing it from a different angle. And maybe it penetrates a little deeper. Maybe they find, and that's really one of the benefits of having great guests, because they bring that different perception, that different delivery method. They'll use different wording,
Sure.
And it gets through to the audience.
That's tremendous. Right after the commercial break, I want to come back, obviously, for people to get to know how they can get to know and get to your show. I'm sure it's on all the major podcast platforms, but it may also be on your website. You may have freebies and lead magnets and other offers that we can benefit from, because we love things that are free. But I think that's also really tremendous that you brought up, all three of you have brought up different ways where you've been able to find an ROI from your podcast. Paul, you've kind of mentioned this kind of podcast funnel approach of how people can kind of be part of the mailing list and then be marinating themselves. Tony, likewise, you talked about a little bit of kind of how people get to know you guys and how you get to know these other professionals. Brian, you talked about it in terms of actual client service or providing value. I call it the curriculum with your clients. I think that's tremendous. For me, that's extremely insightful, because I'm always trying to parse different ways of this kind of not a new medium per se, but it's a relatively new medium compared to, let's say, blogging or seminars, etc. So it's really excellent. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, it'll be great for us to get to know how we can get to know you guys better. And then we'll talk about some of your favorite podcasts and podcast hosts, and we'll call it a day. Let's take a quick break.
Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you.
Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show. And here we are, we're back. Caught Tony off guard. Do you guys know about our show host networking event that happens once a month? Yeah, you guys know about that? So June 30th, I want to say, is the next one. It's the last Thursday of the month. We're making it very podcast host oriented. We used to also invite people who want to be guests on podcasts. We found that can be a little distracting to those of us who run a show, who want to be guests on other people's shows, but not necessarily that there's a swap, because some people are a good fit for others and others aren't a good fit. I think you guys happen to have a really great synergy, but that's not always the case with the guests on my show. So June 30th, I can send you the information. You can go to videosocials.net/show hosts. Very much for the benefit for the viewers and listeners, but we'll send you guys a link. It'll be in the show notes, videosocials.net/show hosts. And it's a really great opportunity to meet other podcast hosts, especially if you like learning from them and even being interviewed and featured on their shows. So finally, if we can go kind of around the table, as it were, Paul, we'll start with you. How do people get a hold of you? How do people get to know you better? Is there any other freebies that you'd like to offer? And how can we listen to your show?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I always appreciate it. The best place for people to connect with me is either Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, any social media platform. Really, it's just my name @Paul Levitin across all social platforms. I keep it super simple. My podcast is Happy Healthy Human. Again, anywhere you find podcasts, I'm sure that it's there. It exists just in the internet. And I do have, a big part of what I teach about. Again, I was saying before about the kind of the human stuff that I think is what really holds people back. So a big part of what I talk about is self-sabotage. So I have a free masterclass on how to avoid self-sabotage, basically, that I'm happy to give to anyone. I'll include links to put in the show notes, but it's a 45-minute masterclass on how to avoid what I call the human tendencies, because there's certain things in human nature that make us prone to self-sabotage, and why we all kind of do it. And as even Tony said before, people know what they should, or I think it was actually Brian said, they know what they should be doing, but they're not, right? So it's like, how do we avoid these certain things? And if we can avoid those little roadblocks that aren't possibly going to come up, they're always going to come up, that are going to be the reason that you quit. That's how we end up finding success in whatever endeavor. So that's a masterclass that I'll send you the link to as well.
Great, Paul. That's awesome. Is there a web address that you want to mention as if people are listening? Is there a website address that people can go to if they can't see the show notes?
No, the best place, honestly, to just connect with me is on Instagram. Okay. Just shoot me a DM at Paul Levitin. I respond to all of them. I'm super active over there, and social media is like the main place I spend my time. So
nice. All right, good. Keep that going. Tony, what about you? What's an easy way for people to get a hold of you? Is there any other thing that you want to offer to people watching and listening?
Number one, our website is www.doobie, that's do-beassociates.com. There, you can take an assessment if your business can handle a 4-day work week. We also have an assessment on enlightened management. When you do one of those assessments, we offer a complimentary session. Spend an hour with the doobies. Find out what some of your issues are. We'll bring some value, and you can benefit from learning what we can do, because the only way we can show people what we can do for real is to experience us, because there aren't too many coaching consulting combinations out there, and I think that's what really differentiates us in the marketplace.
Cool.
And in addition to the It's Doobie Time podcast, we have our weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called Enlightened Management. And it's for managers trying to figure out how to get more from their people and to be better managers. Brian, I hope I didn't cover too much and left to say.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Brian, you want to correct Tony and fill in the blanks?
Nothing to correct there. And not many blanks left.
Sorry.
Not a problem. The one thing I guess I would say about enlightened management is we're making the distinction between leading, which may or may not have any formal role in the organization, and managing, which happens from the business owner, the CEO, right down to the frontline manager. And in that newsletter, we're really looking at how the shift from the traditional office worker to the knowledge worker has really driven the need for a different approach to managing your employees.
And lastly, Vic, before we go, I guess I have to get this in here, Brian, and you know what we need to do. When times get tough in business,
it's doobie time.
Doobie time. Well, we're not done yet. Brian, I'd love to circle back to you. Paul mentioned that he's a big podcast junkie. That's my phrase, not his. I am too. I'm a podcast addict. Again, my phrase, not his. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts as well?
I don't listen to a lot. I sort of cycle in and out of them.
Sure.
But I think, and you had mentioned this, Vikram, early on, I think my favorite podcast host is Greg Mcewen. Greg is the author of 2 books that I am constantly recommending to clients. Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, and Effortless, which is how to do it
with less
effort.
And do you know Greg well, or he's
he and I have exchanged a few LinkedIn chats.
Communique.
I really don't know him.
All right. Okay.
But I would say he's one of my mentors.
Oh, awesome. So one of those remote mentors. That's awesome. Well, I hope he can come on our show and talk about his podcast. Tony, what about you? Do you listen to a lot of podcasts and other shows and things like that?
I being a very impatient business owner, I listen and I stop listening and I go in and out. And so I'm a tough person to ask this question, but you know, we just reconnected with a very old good friend who I love his knowledge as an insight. His name is Charles Bernard. His podcast is called Let's Talk Sales. And I just think he is one of the best sources of knowledge. And he's one of those podcast guests and one of those people who comes at it from a different angle. But we're looking to do this, accomplish the same thing. And that's what I find exciting when I listen to somebody who's like, yeah, oh, that's what I'm trying to, oh, that's a different way to say that. That's what I love about his stuff.
So talk about, it goes back to your point of reframing maybe something that you would also mention to your clients or prospective clients, but he's able to reframe it or come at it with a different perspective. That's Definitely. Cool. All right. Definitely. Well, I'd love for him to come on the show. So that's great. Thank you for mentioning him. And I'm going to listen to it as well.
Vikram, I was just going to say our last 2 episodes are with Charles.
Oh, really? Oh, well, right. Part 1 and part 2. Okay, great. Okay, good. Then I'll listen to that episode and then I'm going to go back to his podcast as well because I'm constantly listening to different ones. And I'm like you, Tony. Like, it's very much, all right, is this going to grab my attention? It's the sort of topic I really want to listen to. Am I getting it from the guest, getting their energy? And then if not, you know, I have no problem stopping. So hopefully people have continued to hear Paul's. Are you a raving fan of a particular host that you know well, Paul?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate the most about podcasting is you get to meet people and kind of connect and be on different shows. And to Tony's point, you talked about kind of you have people who are kind of saying the same thing, but in a different way. And those are my favorite because I don't know if this is just me being cocky, but I'm like, yeah, like they get it. And then like, that's the stuff I want to hear. And I have people like that on my show where I'm like, should I be like, are we just saying the same thing over and over? But I think those are the things that need to be said, that these nuggets, as you said, that just, they need to be sometimes, for lack of better words, beaten into people's heads until they get the point. This person was a guest on my show, and his show is amazing too. His name is Adrian Moreno, and his show is called Human Being Unleashed. And he was actually the hypnotherapist that I was mentioning before. So he's a certified hypnotherapist and a mindset coach. And it was just really interesting because, again, I have a lot of these type of mindset people who are that I listen to, that I talk to, but the way speaking about it through hypnosis, which is something that I wasn't very well versed in before we spoke, but it wasn't in like a hokey way. It wasn't in like a weird kind of like magical way. It was like the science of training your brain. It was a super interesting conversation that we had. And then I've since been a fan of his show that I now listen to. And he's a really, really smart, knowledgeable person for sure.
Cool. Is it Human Being Unleashed?
Yeah, Human Being
Being
Unleashed.
Unleashed. All right, cool. We'll check that out as well. And hopefully you can come as a future guest. This has been exciting. I think all three of you have touched on the aspects of learning from each other and learning from your podcast guests. And I've learned from you guys. I mean, it's why I do this. There's a very selfish motivation. Very much you guys are reframing the types of points that we try to make with our clients and prospective clients. You know, obviously we know why someone should podcast. There's some type of ROI or emotional fulfillment. It's quite frankly fun for me to chat with you guys. And hopefully it's also fun to watch and listen to you guys as well. And so for you guys to come on and talk about your experience of why you podcast and the benefits your audience, your guests, and that your business has gained from your podcast is tremendous. And for us, video interview podcast is a natural evolution, a cross-promotion tool, in addition to written blogs and video blogs that obviously my company has been involved with for many years. But thank you so much for all of your time today and sharing your insights. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Again, my name is Vik Rajan. I am the co-founder of Video Socials. You can get to know us through all the Video Socials websites of videosocial.net and Video Social VIP. I look forward to seeing you at the next show hosts event. I say that to Paul, Brian, and Tony, and I look forward to each of you coming on and checking out our show host networking. Until next time, Fridays 1 o'clock for YB Podcast. Bye.